Welcome back, everybody. We've had a month off here, or at least I have. This is radio show number 11, the Digital Craft radio show. Before I get into our list, I want to note that I think what I'm going to do is merge the vlogs and the radio show together. Maybe not every time, but most times. That way, one, I can keep those going at a better rate without doing two separate ones, and planning for two separate ones doesn't make any sense, considering my vlogs are pretty much me talking into a microphone anyways, and looking up at the monitor that I can see myself on and the other monitor I can see myself on. So there's not much difference there. And we've been posting our, well, it kind of automatically happens, but we post a copy of the radio show onto YouTube, and it's just a boring Spreaker screen that just sits there while you listen. So why not add some video? Not that I'm really that exciting, but why not put the two together? Now I've got some points to talk here about. Scalable fonts. I want to thank one of our frequent students, Simon Morris, for bringing those up. Scalable fonts for websites. It's a pretty interesting thing. Well, I'll get more into that later, but it's pretty cool. I wanted to talk about WYSIWYG editors a little bit. Something that we brought up in the tutorials that we've done, or have not finished yet. Then talk a little bit about audio software in regards to how I put these things together here, like the radio show, the blogs, or vlogs for that matter. And also talk about the hiatus that I took this month, which I'll talk about that first, actually. So first we'll talk about the hiatus. Those of you who follow us on Facebook, you have already probably seen me post something about a week or so ago about that. What's going on with me and why I need to take a break. But for those who don't, I'll discuss that here. And kind of the follow-up to that post that I made now that it's been a couple weeks. First, I need some liquid energy, which makes an amazing sound when it opens. And then it steams. Yeah, there you go. So first we'll talk about that hiatus. I have a injury from when I was a kid that I was brilliant and jumped into a public pool at the wrong end. I had never been there before, in my own defense. As someone who was on the swim team and did very well, that was the only sport I did well at, but probably because I was taller than everybody and had an advantage. But I'd never been to this particular pool before, and from all the pools I've been in, this pool, the deep end and the shallow end, were in the different spots from what I was used to. So being a kid, I got a running start and jumped into 2 feet of water and pretty much just smashed everything from my waist up, or everything from my waist down up, and I was rushed to the emergency room. I couldn't walk. I couldn't keep my, like, anything I did hurt so bad that it took my legs out, like that sharp pain some of you may know of. It just kind of knocks you flat. But ultimately, the doctors didn't see anything. Yeah, this was back in the early 90s. So either the doctors weren't very competent or technology wasn't competent. But then later on, I learned that after going to a chiropractor about 10 years later, I had taken a trip to California. I drove all the way there. It's a good 3,000, 4,000 miles. And once that trip was over, my back was just in shambles. And I had never really felt back pain. That was really new to me. So when I came home from that trip a couple months later, I started seeing a chiropractor, and he took x-rays. And he just kind of nonchalantly asked me, so when did you break your back? I'm like, excuse me? He says, when did you fracture your back? You have a small like hairline fracture in your, I think it's the second lower vertebrae, for lack of better terms. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know I broke my back. And he said, I told him that I'd gotten an injury when I was about 11 years old, 10 years old. And he said that seemed about right. And either way, it didn't heal right, obviously, because the hospital didn't see it. They basically told me to just take it easy, stay off of it. And I did my best to do that, but, I was a kid, so things happen. So, long story short, another 10 years later, or more, it's in really bad shape. And I've been taking medicine for it for a good 4 years. But this medicine I was taking had horrible, agonizing withdrawal symptoms. So getting off of that medicine, while it wasn't really it wasn't some narcotic or anything to where I had some horrible addiction to or anything, but there was definitely a physical dependence that I did not want to go through the withdrawal. And it was pretty debilitating, which is pretty much why I was gone for a month. Between that and then when that faded off, then the full amount of pain I had came back, and just simple things like sitting in my chair for long periods of time or short periods of time became anywhere between irritating to agonizing, depending just on the day, the situation, how long I'd been there. So I had to take a break. I couldn't focus on anything. It was too distracting. The only thing I really did was do our private lessons. Those keep things going, plus I can't, leave those people hanging. But once I got off of that medicine, I decided there's no reason to go back to it. Not at least after seeing somebody. We have insurance now, where we didn't for about a year. Working for yourself doesn't really cater to that luxury. But so we have insurance, and now I'm seeing a specialist as of last week to do physical therapy and take a much milder or safer, I guess, solution for the pain in the meantime. So I'm getting my, for lack of better words, mojo back, and ready to get back into the thick of things. But that's the hiatus. I needed a break anyways. I've been working sometimes 24 hours to 48 hours in a row on this stuff, and I needed a break anyway. That's all for that. We'll get back into the show itself. So I want to talk about scalable fonts. Now, somebody got the bright idea, which I think is pretty awesome. This is not necessarily new, but it's newer, and you can only keep up on so many things, especially as this new HTML5 and CSS3 is out, and people are coming up with new ideas and new ways to manipulate that, along with using jQuery and things like that. And a few people, one group in particular, Font Awesome or whatever, I don't know if that's the name of their product or their group or whatever, but they've come up with Font Awesome, which you can find doing a search on that. And what they've done is something that we've been doing for a long time. We just never really capitalized on the idea. And that is taking advantage of fonts to make icons, shapes, symbols, things like that. And, anybody who's seen Windings and Webdings knows that we do have that. We have little symbols and things like that we can use. And that's all fine and dandy. But no one's really expanded on that. And those are all pretty simple icons. And those of you who understand the difference between vector and raster graphics, ignore the train. You can probably hear it. Those of you who understand vector and raster graphics could understand that getting a vector graphic on a web page was usually really, I think, the only way to really do that was using Flash, which, worked for a long time, but it doesn't give you the full capability and full benefit of a vector graphic. The only other way to use vector objects, we'll say, on a web page is with fonts. Most fonts now are totally scalable vector shapes. So no matter how big you make them, they're still going to come out nice and smooth, as a vector object does. So now what people are doing, like the people who have made this Font Awesome product, which is free, by the way. There's some other ones out there that are not free. They're kind of cheap, though. Like $16 or something, or even less. They've made this great bank of icons. And they're more Web 2.0 type icons, or icons that make more sense with this day and age and web design and development. Little icons like calendars, an edit icon with the piece of paper with the pencil on it, things like that. Icons that we would actually use. And they're all kind of Web 2.0-y looking. I think that's the technical term. And so these are now available to use, and we can make them huge. They're a font set. So now what we can do is we can use this set of icons, which are kind of registered as a font, and along with jQuery and CSS3, we can make really good use of them. Font Awesome in particular allows you to, instead of having to make a class that has the font for the Font Awesome font assigned to it, or that rule, they have it set up so that you can use the increasingly or now defunct, I believe, I tag, which used to be for italic, which we now use the EM tag for that, for emphasis. But so now we can use this I tag, and you just give it this one property, which now I can't think of what it's called, icon type or icon name or something like that. Either way, you just give this, just like you would give a tag a class, you give it this property, and then the value of that property is whatever icon you want to use out of the set, and they have a whole list on their website next to the icon, so you know which one you're getting. So you can now use these icons really easily by using the I tag, which makes sense, icon, and just give it the type that you want, which icon you want, and it'll appear. Now, of course, you need to be able to size it and things like that, which you could do with inline CSS styling, or you could apply some classes, like make a class called big_icon and make the font size, 64 pixels or something like that, or whatever unit of measurement you prefer. And then you can make a font underscore or icon underscore medium and icon underscore small, and so on and so forth. And then use these icons across the board, and they behave just like a font. You can manipulate them, give them hover states, put a link around it, link tag around it, and it's just really cool. Now, I can't necessarily show you that on the radio show, so it's something that you definitely want to check out. So search Google for Font Awesome, or even just scalable vector fonts or scalable fonts. This allows us to do, along with this and web fonts, which I guess we could talk about a little bit, but Google's a good example. They have a bank of web fonts that you can use for free. Web fonts allow you to use fonts that you don't normally have access to, because of the way fonts and websites work, where the fonts are pulled from the browser, they're pulled from the client. So even though you may have a certain font on your computer and you can make a web page with this special font, and you see it just fine, other people who don't have that font don't see it. When they pull up your web page, it reverts to the default sans serif or serif font or whatever font that would default or match that. So these web fonts, which are usually hosted at the source, so with Google Fonts, they're hosted with Google. You just have to refer to them, link to them, and then call upon them. And all of a sudden now you can use those because they're pulling from Google. We're not relying on what the client has on their computer, or the user, however you want to word that. So you can use these nicer, cooler fonts, which in the past we used to have to make images in like Photoshop or Fireworks or whatever to make, if we wanted to do headers or things like that, headings and logos and things with these cool fonts, to make our web pages look cooler, we would always have to export them as an image, which then increases load time. Becomes a pain in the ass when you have to change something. It's much easier to just go into the code and change the text than to go into Photoshop, change the text, maybe position it a little bit better, export it, trim it, whatever, then upload it, then put it back into the code, or change the file name, or whatever. It's a big pain in the ass. That alleviates that. With the fonts, we're doing another thing. We're dropping load time substantially. Now, I mean, if you still have a bunch of raster graphics all over your page, then load time's still going to be load time. But in this case, you're just loading a font set. And you're loading a vector graphic, which a vector graphic is really just a bunch of math. It's an equation or equations, point to point. When they get bigger, the equation, the numbers, whatever, get bigger, for lack of better words. But it's not an image. It's not a bunch of pixels that need to be read. It doesn't take up as much data. I mean, you could overload it and put a million of these things on a page, and you could overload. But ultimately, it's a much nicer way to do it. You can scale things without having to go into Photoshop. All you have to do is change the code, change the CSS, make things a little bit bigger. 64 pixels isn't big enough, so make it 72. And then it gets bigger, and that's all you have to do. No exporting, no nothing, no Photoshop, no Fireworks, whatever. So that's cool. So now, WYSIWYGs. What you see is what you get, editors. In our dynamic series, which we are finishing soon, I promise, we are right at the point where we are putting a WYSIWYG editor in. And I've been a big proponent for TinyMCE. However, I've started to notice a couple other ones that are a little they're less heavy, they're lightweight. While TinyMCE now has a jQuery version, it still has this huge bank of JavaScript that you have to download. And it almost seems as if, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like because TinyMCE was built based on JavaScript before jQuery, or before the popularity of jQuery increased, they saw a need to use jQuery, but they kind of put jQuery in around what they had already built. Whereas jQuery already has its own library that you have to load, and you're kind of pulling in these two libraries, and it's a massive thing. It's a really great product, but it's massive. If you just really need a quick solution, Simon again turned me on to Redactor. Now, it's not totally free. You can do a trial version of it, and I think you can use it for as long as you want, really. I think it has a limit, but I don't think anybody's going to really care as long as you're not doing anything commercial with it, which then at that point you need to buy a license. But at that point, if you're doing something commercial, then you should charge your client for it or charge yourself for it. And at that point, you should be buying it. But if you're just doing it to test and to learn, I can't speak for them, but I don't, at least use the trial and then see what else they've got, But there's other ones out there too. But the big difference is you can get the Redactor without this giant library. You just get the jQuery file that has all the inner workings for it to work with jQuery, and then you just kind of call on it. It's pretty simple. There's not a huge bank of stuff to upload. But yeah, that's kind of sums that up. But just for anybody who wasn't clear what a WYSIWYG editor is, it's the difference between typing into a text field that's empty or just a boring text field, and having a text field that has a whole bunch of tools that kind of resembles Microsoft Word or any kind of rich text editor, with the option to center things or position things and add tables and pretty much any HTML element, along with making things bold, italic, etc. So that's what a WYSIWYG editor is. What you see is what you get. What you type in is what it's going to look like, for the most part. So again, WYSIWYG. Take a look at TinyMCE. take a look at Redactor, and just take a look in general. Just search for WYSIWYG, WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Kind of research on your own. I know there's a handful of them out there. You might even be able to find one like Redactor that's completely free. And then for the scalable fonts, take a look at Font Awesome, and then search for other ones. I know there's a bunch of other ones out there, but Font Awesome was the first one that I saw. And again, I want to thank Simon for that. Audio software. What we use right now, I'm using Sonar. This is not necessarily an industry standard by any means. It's made by a company called Cakewalk, and their first product was called Cakewalk. And my first experience with recording software, even though it was simply MIDI based, which if anybody doesn't know what MIDI really is, MIDI is, for layman's terms, I can plug a keyboard in via MIDI and hit record, and what I'm actually recording is the on and off of each key, the velocity of each key, things like that. I'm recording data, not necessarily the audio itself. And think of it more like a trigger. So when I hit the A key on a keyboard, the MIDI sends that information that I hit the A key, and it sends how long I held it down, things like that. And if I'm messing with knobs and things like that, it sends that data too, whether I shifted the pitch or not. That's MIDI, but no actual audio data, no waveforms, no nothing. It's being sent. And that's what Cakewalk 1 and 2 was. So I learned from that. So I got really comfortable with their software. Now it's evolved substantially. That was a DOS program. And it's definitely taken different shapes and forms over the years. They moved into Cakewalk Pro Audio was the new name. Once they started adding audio capability, where then you are actually recording audio, the waves, the actual audio data. But then sometime, I think in the 2000s, maybe a little bit before, they switched over to, they rebranded it as Sonar. And it started to take the shape more in the likes of Pro Tools and the industry standard tools. It still has its own look and feel and its own ups and downs and things that Pro Tools doesn't have, and a lot of stuff that Pro Tools does have, Sonar doesn't have. But it's a pretty robust program. Either way, I'm comfortable with it. I know how to use it. I know the interface. And I'm not doing anything major. I'm not recording big studio albums, things like that. So it works for me. Another one I'm very fond of for recording pretty much single track audio is SoundForge, which used to be owned by Sonic Foundry, and then Sony bought it out many years back, around the time that acid came out. Not the recreational drug, but the program for making beats and loops and things like that. That was a Sonic Foundry program too, and I think the popularity of that brought Sony into the picture, and they kind of bought, I don't think all of their programs, but a lot of their software they bought. And SoundForge is just a really easy way to make a quick audio recording, but also have the ability to do a lot of the professional effects and things like that to some degree. So I really like that. In fact, I'll probably do some mastering or I'll mix everything here, drop it down. I'm doing two tracks right now, both microphones, and I'll do a little editing and then drop it down and pull it into SoundForge, finish it up in there. Then I'll take that track, untrimmed, just edited but not trimmed in any way, just the actual audio data edited, so it's still the right length. And then I'll take that and I'll take it into Adobe Premiere and lay it on top of the video file that we're looking at right now. Unless you're not watching the video, you're actually listening to the radio program. But that's kind of how that works. There's a bunch of other programs out there. Adobe's got their own Adobe Audition, which is starting to come a long way. I'm still not comfortable with the interface as much as I am with Sonar. But with that, to me it's kind of like Mac and PC. If you're not doing things in a really, really professional environment, then pick something that works and that you're comfortable with and go with it. If you prefer to use Sonar rather than Pro Tools, then go for it. But if you're going to be recording, putting together a studio and all that, you probably already know the answers to this anyways. But if you are looking to be more professional with things, then, looking into the bigger tools like Pro Tools and now I can't think of it, something Performer, Digital Performer, some of the other ones out there are a little more suited for that. But again, if you're in that industry, you probably already know that. But that's pretty much the end of my spiel today. We're working on a music source to get a whole bank of music in here to get back to that format. I may slide some music in here. On this one, I don't know yet, but I'm also going to be doing pre-recorded shows unless otherwise specified. That gives me the ability to do it a little freer and edit it, and it's better for me to get things out on a consistent basis for now anyways. But this was a short one. We don't have any ads, we don't have any music, so I just wanted to get those out there. May do some tutorials on some of these things too. I will note that we are definitely getting back to the dynamic series to finish that. It is a thorn in our side. It is very upsetting for us to have that open-ended there. We're definitely losing people, and we don't like that. But back when I made those, we didn't have the viewer or the numbers anyway that we have now. So I was able to make things as I went, record them, upload them, then work on the next part. And people were keeping up with me on that. Now we're getting so many people out there finding us and stumbling upon us that they're getting frustrated that series isn't done, and that sucks for them. And we feel really bad about that. So now that I've got my situation taken care of, at least for now, I can get back into this. So look for that here soon. Look for some other really great stuff coming from the digital craft. I'm still recovering a little bit from things, but I'm getting back in the game, kind of forcing myself back in, being away from things, going, a mile a minute for 4 or 5 years on this stuff, and then taking, going to a screeching halt, and then taking a whole month off. It's taken me a little bit to get the motivation up. I've got the urge to do things, but the motivation is gradually coming back. So look for more for us. Thank everybody for hanging around. Thank Jack and Justin for sticking around while I've been out. Look for more banter between us two on the radio shows. And soon we'll have a set day and time for the radio show. I'll be joining Justin, I'm sure, on his radio show more too. So anyway, that's it for today. Thank you guys.